Hello, I'm so happy you've joined me for this week's episode of the Make It Happen podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, then hi, my name is Melanie Moreno, and I'm the host. And let me just say you've chosen an excellent day to tune in. I mean, each episode is an excellent one to listen to, of course, but today's conversation touches on a lot of topics very near and dear to me, and also to my guest. Actually, my guest is someone that I've been wanting to get on the podcast for months. Our schedules just weren't lining up before, but that's okay because divine timing, and, I think we finally got around to chatting at the most wonderful time. As you may or may not know, I do quite a bit of planning for these episodes, and much of that is because I want to make sure I'm bringing on guests who are authentic and passionate human beings. So some of the people I've known for a while, others I've simply watched their journey and intrigue tells me to reach out to them. The other situation that happens with guests is where I'll see someone and maybe learn one or two things about them, and then I'm convinced that we should become best friends. Does this happen with anyone else where you see someone and just a vibe right away? Today's guest, Marcie, kind of fits that bill. She is the creator of Happy Moment, which is a local to me baking business where she makes vegan and organic pastries. Her baked goods are pretty killer, let me tell you. Her brownies are some of the best I've ever tried. But putting that aside, there is so much more to Marcie than her baked goods. In fact, I don't think we even talk about her business at all in this episode. She is an ultra busy lady who is so filled with heart and compassion, and I felt called to ask her how she does it all. That is, how she finds balance with herself, her values, and her endeavors. In the episode, we talk about the transcending nature of friendships, how she started paying attention to her own mental health, and what that looks like for her now. We talk about the different forms of self-care and finding fresh approaches to problems in a way that resonates with us personally. A big theme of the episode is that each person is different, so neither of us can say what works or what doesn't. We don't have the final say in the way something should look or what image you need to live up to. It's really refreshing to hear Marcie's perspective, and I think you'll also adore her gentle voice. As I gave the episode a preliminary listen, I felt oddly soothed by her voice, which isn't something that I really experience all that often. Hopefully that's not strange to say, but oh well. Marcie, if you're listening, you have a very sweet and calming voice. For everyone else, the content coming from said voice is 100% worthwhile too, so stick around for this conversation with Marcie Morlett, starting now.
Like, I've never had like a hydro flask or anything like that. I would always carry mason jars.
Who needs a hydro flask?
Yeah,
a mason jar. I like the very environmentally friendly aspect of mason jars, the way so many things come in jars now, and it's easy to just reuse them as your cup. Can't even remember when I was younger and my mom would buy jars of sauces and whatnot, like all the times we threw them away, and I just look back like, wasted cups. But I understand some people want like this clean aesthetic of all the cups looking the same and not, I don't know. I'm okay with the odds and ends.
Yeah, the variety. I was thinking about that the other day because I recently like shifted my closet to another room, and I used to be like, I'm gonna have all the hangers be the same. And I was like, it's so wasteful to like get rid of all these hangers and then just to have them all look the same. Like, no.
Seems to defy the norm, like what culture tells us we should like. In a way, it tells us you should have one set of everything looking the same, or finished pieces, nothing broken, everything needs to look perfect, right? But there's a lot of items that already are in existence, material items that we can still use. And yeah, so it's beautiful, like, to upcycle.
Yeah, definitely. I think I remember I saw a video about that once. There was this, I don't remember her name, but she was talking about that, how with this whole like minimalist movement and how it was good that people were really reconsidering the items that they had in their home, but it kind of defeated the purpose a little bit if it was like, we're going to get rid of everything to put everything new just so that it fits that aesthetic. Like you're saying, like all of these large mason jars for all of my bulk items. And it's like, well, we can use like butter containers and like you mentioned, like all of like the old cans and jars. And yeah, just depends on.
That's wild. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. That does happen. In the effort to condense and clean out, you buy these new storage containers and everything. Wow.
Well, being mindful. I guess about the intent behind what it is that you're doing.
And maybe not feeling obligated to live up to the idea of what culture tells us or certain rules that typically exist around the way one thing like minimalism should look. It can look different for everyone.
Right. Definitely.
I'm going to start by saying hi, welcome to the Make It Happen podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you.
Hi. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Marcie, and that's a hard question to introduce myself. Okay. Well, I guess I'm just a 28-year-old girl, lives in the valley, trying to be her authentic self and connecting with other people. Yeah, and I like to bake. Short and sweet.
I like that. And I really like the word authentic. I don't know if I've told you, but that's one of my favorite words.
It's my 2020 word.
Is it? How do you go about choosing that word?
Well, I guess I was just thinking of what is like my theme. That and discipline, but I think that's probably the main thought that I've had in my mind as I exited 2019 was just trying to be myself. I want to be myself, try to not have a filter. And then I realized, oh, well, it's me being authenticity. So I've just tried to keep that in the back of my mind as I interact with people, as I move forward in decisions that I'm making, like in my day to day. Like, is this really a decision that I feel happy with? So.
Were you asking yourself those same questions in 2019?
I think so, but I feel like I would beat myself up for it. So it was like that process of being okay with doing what I wanted to do and what I felt comfortable with. So I guess that process started in 2019, but now I embrace it a lot more, and I feel like it's a part of what I need in order to like just live my life. Like I wouldn't be comfortable now in a setting where I feel like I'm explicitly being inauthentic or intentionally being inauthentic. I don't think I would stand being in that position anymore.
So what does that mean? Do you identify situations where you might have to act a certain way and you just avoid those, or do you go into it bringing all your walls down and just saying, I'm going to be myself?
It's more of that, because I think definitely last year I identified situations where I tended to not be as authentic for, reasons that I had, and I kind of shied away from it because it would make me feel uncomfortable. And so through the process that I've been going through and trying to be more mindful, now I feel like I'm ready to kind of take that step and like, okay, no, I can be in these situations and be myself, learn to have boundaries, kind of how we discussed last time. Having boundaries has been a huge part of that. So
what do you mean about boundaries exactly?
So I guess, when I started going to therapy last year, so that was a really huge breakthrough for me because I was exposed to, validating feelings and having boundaries. And I remember I was given a worksheet of all of these different types of boundaries, like physical boundaries, emotional boundaries. And so those are limits that, we can put if we feel like something is too much, or maybe an interaction is crossing, I guess that's the same word, a boundary for us. For me, that was something, it was a completely new concept, the idea of kind of saying no, basically, to someone. For me, honestly, that was just really eye-opening and really caused me to take a step back and reanalyze pretty much all of my life decisions from, how I would act at work, how I would act with my friends, with my family, even with myself.
I think boundaries are meant to be, well, we'll talk about the self-care culture. I feel like that's a whole thing on its own. But in that self-care culture, I think boundaries are really advocated, like, put boundaries in place, don't go overextending yourself. At the same time, it sounds like you're saying that boundaries can also be inhibiting. It works both ways.
Right. No, it does. It's actually, I hadn't even thought about it on the flip side, just because I guess I found myself being on the opposite end, where I think I definitely was aware of other people's boundaries, but I always saw myself in the sense of, I don't know, just being okay accommodating so much to other people, not realizing at the expense of what. And I think that's for me something else that I really try to highlight when I've had this conversation with people. Like, it's not about being selfish and only looking out for yourself, but it's important keeping in mind how that makes you feel, and I guess the repercussions, because sometimes you can find yourself compromising your own values and your own comfort for someone else, and that can create an imbalance.
What do you think makes you slip into that sort of feeling, the way you said, where what makes you personally overextend yourself or not consider yourself?
I think just genuinely wanting to help. Like, I feel like, and I've thought about this so much, if it's part of the culture, part of how I grew up, seeing, my mom and how she's, was always quick to help me. And I have a lot of those conversations even now with her. I have a really close relationship with my mom. And as I've been learning, I observe her sometimes, how she's so quick to do things for me, sometimes without checking herself first to see how she feels. And then I'm like, wow, this is, we learned behaviors, and we see it around us. And even with some other friends where I've had conversations and they're like, well, it's really hard, to say no, or to partake in something that maybe you don't want to partake to, just to give an example. And then I realized that it's not just me having those feelings. So I feel like partially it may be a culture thing or just like a learned behavior, but genuinely, honestly, for me, it's been wanting to help others and feeling that I can kind of brave through it and that I can figure it out myself. And that's not to say that I feel like others can't figure it out themselves, but I just feel like if I can help, then I'll do it. But now I'm like, well, take a step back, check how you feel, check your schedule, see if it's not overextending yourself, and then if you can help, then go ahead and do it. That's, I guess, the mindset I'm trying to think before I go out and do.
I know this realization probably didn't come overnight, and you mentioned that you've been going to therapy. So what was actually the first moment where you're like, okay, I need to do some deeper self work? Because I think everyone generally knows that we're supposed to eat well and exercise, but no one really talks about mental health. So when did you realize that was important in your life?
Honestly, in January of last year, I had just, I guess, like a breaking point, and I call it like a breakdown. I couldn't function. I had to leave work. And that for me was pretty much the big red flag that told me that I needed to go and seek more help, because I had been aware, I guess, in terms of like mental health, because I had felt anxiety prior. It was important about breathing and being mindful. And I knew that it was important to exercise and eat well, but somehow I just kind of, the last couple of months of 2018 got really busy. I was, with the business, and I was going out, and I was not taking care of myself at all. And I came to realize that combination of not eating, not sleeping, just being go. And I had just, I guess, a little personal situation that wasn't even that big when I think about it now, but it was just like that breaking point. And I had a breakdown. That whole weekend when it happened, I was like uncontrollable crying. Like, it was something I had never experienced before, and it was really scary. Keeping in mind also, I guess, the mentality that I had before of being very independent and self-sufficient and being able to handle anything on my own. And in that moment, it was a different kind of vulnerability. And yeah, so I reached out to a therapist, and I think within the following 2 weeks, I got an appointment. And by that time, it was interesting because I felt better. And I remember thinking, like, well, because I was a little bit intimidated, I think, at the idea of being even more vulnerable with someone I hadn't met before. But I was like, no, well, that happened. And I thought to myself, I can't do that to myself, to allow that to happen again without getting some help. So, I started going to therapy. And from the first session, it was amazing. I noticed instantly, like, yeah, it was amazing. the process started from there, and it just evolved. Every single month I feel that I would have this new realization, and I feel like that's what snowballed into where I'm at now.
So when you say that prior to getting the appointment, you started to feel better, what were you doing during that time when you were just, at your end?
I feel it's all a blur. I've even asked my mom, I'm like, well, what did I do? Because I completely disconnected. And I feel within the year I've had periods where like I've kind of just shut off from my phone. That meme, like, oh, did someone throw their phone in the river? Like, that was me. Like, I would, because I experienced a lot of anxiety. Like, I would see messages and I would read them, and it would be like the simplest message from some of my friends, and the idea of like interacting with other people seemed very daunting, and that was very strange for me because I've always been really social and I love to talk, and I think so part of that was just kind of like staying away from other people and just being with my mom. Honestly, I would be here and just sleep, relax, because I was really tired. So I feel like during that time I gave my body the rest that it needed, and my brain too, because I had a lot of just mental fogginess. So I guess physically I started to feel better, but I knew that I still needed to talk about what had happened. So that was what gave me that push to continue.
Did you ever feel like you could talk to someone prior? Is that something that you've had trouble with? Like, considering you are pretty independent and like handling things for yourself and helping other people, do you usually volunteer that sort of part of yourself, like to talk about something that's going on?
I feel like, I guess I had always felt like I was pretty open, just because feel like at least through social media, I've been open about like sharing different aspects of my life. And I didn't feel an apprehension per se. I think it was just the idea of it being a different type of experience in the sense of being someone completely unknown. Because I have, my friends and with my mom, and I've always been open about my anxiety. Well, I will say, in that aspect, I think the idea that seemed the scariest was admitting that I needed help, that I couldn't handle something on my own. And that part, in general, with anyone, that part was difficult. But I overcame that. Very quickly. I felt super comfortable. I feel very blessed that I was very comfortable from the beginning with my therapist. So shout out to Allison.
Well, that was January of last year, you said. So I'm sure it's been a process. What has your self-care routine been like? What do you value in terms of self-care, and what's it look like? A quick interruption from this fascinating conversation to let you guys know about a tool that you can use to deepen your connection to your head, heart, and soul. I created a set of self-discovery journal prompts to help guide you through questions that will get you thinking about what matters to you and provide a foundation for a journaling practice. These are so helpful if you're new to journaling and want a little bit of guidance, or if you just want to tap in further with your vibrant inner self. There are a total of 30 journaling prompts that you can print out and work on for 30 days straight of daily journaling, or you can answer them at your leisure. I've also priced them super affordably because I think they're going to be very helpful, and I want to make sure that they're accessible for everyone. Head to my website, melmakesithappen.com, or click the link in the show notes to download your copy of the 30 Days of Self-Discovery Journaling Prompts today.
Wow, that shifted a lot, I feel, throughout the year, because as I say, like my spirits have kind of evolved. From the beginning of the year, I was very calm, so I wasn't as active. So my self-care routine was definitely just being mindful of just giving myself that space. I feel like I gave myself like so much time, just me by myself, just with my own thoughts. And I will say, I feel like at times I probably did isolate myself a little bit more than I would have preferred, but I'm very thankful that I have a really supportive group of friends that would kind of reach out and try not to let me get too out in the depths. But currently, now that I have a little bit more of an active lifestyle, that I went back to like a 9-to-5 and being more active with the baking, I feel like it's definitely making sure that I have enough hours of sleep throughout the day or every day. making sure that I'm having water and that I'm eating. It's funny because for me, it comes down to like those basics, just because I can get really lost in what I'm doing, that I will not drink water, I won't eat. And even with my mom, we've been trying to, we keep each other in check. So have to check those boxes off first, and then giving myself the time to unwind. So sometimes just even like 20 minutes just to kind of pause and just breathe, because I can catch myself sometimes just being really in my head and not necessarily being present in what it is that I'm doing. And so I've definitely made it a point that, for example, when I come home from work, I'll have my 20 minutes and I'll go into my room and I'll sit down. Sometimes it involves me getting on my phone, because will like interact, like I'll send a message or respond to message, and then sometimes I can gauge when, no, I need to just leave it and meditate a little bit. So that's been a part of that. And exercise too. Physical exercise has helped me a lot. And I can say that I had like the biggest breakthrough ever with my anxiety. At least for me personally, doing physical, just body movement has helped me so much with that, in the sense of helping me get out of my head. So sleep, hydration, food, exercise, me time. Boil it down to those 5.
How do you incorporate those on a regular basis into your life?
That's still a work in progress, definitely. Because it's, personally, I feel like I can be very disciplined if I have like a routine. So for example, I didn't work these last 2 weeks, and I found it really hard not needing to be somewhere at a certain time and trying to have this routine. For some reason, it's so much easier knowing that, okay, if I have to be at work at 7:30, it's easier for me to kind of coordinate myself like that. So I've been trying to find that balance where I'm also not being caught up on the time and so regimented with my schedule, because I feel like that's what I'll tend to lean towards. Like, okay, at this time I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. And then I realize that defeats the purpose of me trying to be calm and present. So I'm still trying to find that balance. But I think definitely with that, being present and mindful has allowed me to be in tune with my body. So I start to notice, like, my body will let me know. And I think something to add to that is that it lets me know I'm more in tune with it like immediately, versus it letting me know 2 weeks later when I'm having a breakdown and it's like at 0. So I'm just in tune, like, okay, that's all right. Oh, I feel a little off. I should probably have some water. Or, oh, I feel a little achy. I didn't stretch this morning, so let me, stretch in the evening.
So it sounds like instead of scheduling in your exercise time or your food or whatever, you just feel it out. You're more connected to you at the present moment and can say, hey, I need a break right now.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I have started to just be more conscious, because prior I would just be like very focused on my tasks. It's kind of interesting how my mindset has really shifted in that sense. It's kind of hard to articulate now that I think about it, but with that being said, I feel like I know I need to come up with some form of structure, because life happens. And right now I'm being very controlling of like my schedule. Like, okay, I'm going to work and I'm baking, but I mean, I also want to incorporate socialization and going out and when unexpected things happen. So I need to still work that out.
If you feel comfortable sharing, what would you say has been the biggest challenge you've ever had to face?
Ooh, that's a good question. Wow. The biggest challenge. I feel like I'm going to lump up this whole being the most authentic version of myself as being my biggest challenge, because I feel like as I've kind of analyzed myself and my habits, any other external challenge that I've had, I feel like I've had the resources to be able to handle and manage it. But it's when it's come to that aspect of like myself, even though I've had wonderful support through therapy and my friends and my family, that's been really tough. That's been like probably my longest work in progress, but the most rewarding as I've overcome that.
I noticed that the things that when we are most in tune with ourselves, the things we're most happy about are those little wins that we get from being ourselves. Instead of, it's not the report card or the bonus at work or whatever. It's, you know, the little wins that you have personally.
Yeah. And I think for me, having this mentality of always, I guess even just growing up, I feel like I always felt like I was validated through my accomplishments, whether it be through school, because, you know, I was student of the month every year and the superstar kid of the week and, you know, the good grades, and I got my job and I went to school and always trying my best and excelling, and that with that, having the thought of I'm not that, even though that came from me, or all of those accomplishments came from me, or I played a role in that, none of that defines me. This is who I am, and I'm still a valid person, and I'm loved for who I am. And I've read before where they say, you know, once you become yourself, or you're being your authentic self, and you see the people around you, and you see the love that you get, you feel it so much more because you know that the people around you love you for you. And that's been also very amazing.
That makes me want to cry. Yeah. As you're fine-tuning yourself, you've, I imagine, cultivated different relationships with the people around you. How has that growth been for all of you as a unit? Because, I mean, it's one thing to go through something alone, but to have that community around you or the support of friends. I know this is something we've touched on before, but I'd really like to hear about it.
Oh, that's been, I think for me, that's, oh gosh, I've cried so many times whenever I've thought about just how I feel really grateful and blessed for the people that have come into my life, who I call like my family and my friends now, because like I had mentioned, I didn't necessarily have issues sharing in the past whenever I've had, you know, situations, like just personal situations that happen, or like through my anxiety or things at work. So I've always felt like I could seek, like, I guess, comfort through my friends. But when I guess when things got as serious as they got for me, I want to say probably mid last year, I remember I had this period during the summer where, like, I think I reached out to a lot of my friends and I was like, I'm so sorry for being absent. And I had felt really bad that I had been focusing on myself so much that I had realized that some of my friends had, you know, some of their own personal situations. And I was like, oh, how could I not have, you know, been involved? Or I'm sorry if I wasn't present. I don't remember exactly what sentiments I shared, but seeing the response from my friends being like, no, like quite the opposite. And I feel from that point on, I started becoming a lot more vocal about, you know, mental health and self-care, and the fact that I know that if I don't feel well and I need to cancel plans, and it's something that we've planned for a week, I'm not saying that that's happened or that that's going to happen, but, and I know that if I can't, and I say, you know what, I can't because of this, that my friends will understand, and they know that it's vice versa. So I like that I'm able to have these conversations, and now that I see it in the bigger picture, I love the experience and the progress and the growth that I've had, because I know that now I'm fostering a lot more like healthier relationships with my friends, and it's just an overall good feeling, you know, to know that I'm supported. My friends have support as well through me.
Do you have any friends that you feel didn't give you that sort of support that, you know, you desire in a friendship, or who just weren't really of the same mindset, just kind of growing up and parting ways with? Has that ever been an experience for you?
Yes, sort of. I did have an experience, and it kind of had stemmed even from the beginning of last year, where, as I mentioned, I kind of disconnected myself a lot from mainly everyone I feel, and I do believe that there was an experience with someone where they had kind of taken it a bit personally, in the sense of thinking that they had done something wrong, and that's why I had kind of disconnected myself. And then I didn't give also any explanation. I just like shut off. So I can understand how this person could have felt that way. And we did have a conversation after the fact several months later. I did kind of like apologize and explain myself as to why it was that had happened. And I don't think that it's that I wasn't supported, because I feel like all of my friends for the most part and the people around me were understanding. I think it's more of perhaps just having different mindsets and understanding that people are in different parts of their evolution in this. And I think sometimes for some people, when, I don't want to generalize here, but I think just because I don't want to make assumptions either, but
well, based on your experience.
Yeah, it's so weird. I was trying to not generalize and be cautious with my words here. And something that I'm working on too, just being direct, like just say it, Marcie, and don't sugarcoat things. I think it can be a reminder of, like, let's say for me, right, prior, if someone else would have brought up boundaries, I had no idea what that was, and I may have maybe reacted negatively to the idea of boundaries and maybe saying no in certain circumstances or not compromising your feelings. And it can make people uncomfortable, and if they're not ready, I feel like it can be overwhelming. So I think I had that experience with someone where our dynamic changed, definitely. Our dynamic changed, and I don't feel negatively about it, because I just see it as part of my journey. Not sure if that was clear.
That's interesting. Yeah, I guess I wonder, because as you start to become more connected to yourself, it has to narrow down. You're not going to be for everybody. Not you, but generally someone, like one person isn't for everyone. So you're more likely to be for everyone if you're only sharing very surface level things and only talking about a few select things. But once you get, even opening up about spirituality, sometimes that's enough to deter people. They'll right away be like, no, I'm not interested in this. I don't want to hear you talk about your, woo-woo beliefs or whatever. And so, yeah, the more you start talking about things that really feel like you, not everyone's going to want to stick around.
Yeah. And I don't, and at least with the experience, it hasn't been where someone has just blatantly been like, well, no, and like, don't talk about this, or been outwardly like aggressive about it. I haven't had any kind of experience like that. I guess more than anything now that I'm kind of gathering my thoughts, because I believe in energy and in frequencies, I think about that your vibe attracts your tribe quote. And I just think as people progress, sometimes it's just like seasons. Sometimes you connect with people in periods of your life, and I believe everything happens for a reason. So, we're here to learn from each other. So I definitely feel like I learned a lot from my experiences that I had with this person in particular, and I have lessons that I can take from that. I'm not sure if that was a good example to answer that question, and that's why I have a hard time answering it or connecting it.
Maybe you haven't had too many. That's one person, and it sounds like most of your relationships have been very good about transcending.
Yeah, definitely. I've been, like I said, I feel really grateful when I think back about that. How I have, a group of friends that I've had at least for a year, and then most of them for more than that. And to think that even though I've evolved so much and my mindset has shifted so much, that we still have connecting points, and they've also evolved and changed. And even though we may not have the same exact goals in mind and the same exact focus, we're generally moving in the same direction. So that allows us to be able to still connect and learn from each other more than anything.
I think that's very important, to not just have that support system, but to be able to learn from each other. I think because otherwise you feel a little stagnant, and you might kind of go bouncing around with the same problems. But if you can talk about things and learn from each other, then that's where the growth happens.
Yeah, like I've had some amazing conversations where, with a friend, for example, where we've apologized to each other over, perhaps a phrase that we use, and we're very mindful, and then we'll have conversations about, what does it mean? Sometimes I think back to my interactions, and I feel really, again, I can't say that enough. I just feel really grateful and blessed about it, because I think back to perhaps maybe 2 years ago, I started to become more mindful about my interactions and how I was engaging with my friends and the types of conversations. And I really felt like I wanted to, I guess maybe back then, that's where the seed started being planted about authenticity, right? So I started to think about how I felt comfortable and what didn't make me feel comfortable. And I would share with some friends, like, I would prefer to not engage in these types of conversations. And, having my friends respect that at the time, was amazing. And so moving forward, seeing how that has progressed and evolved, it's been great.
With the rise of non-toxic products in the beauty and skincare industry, it's hard to find what's worth trying. There's one brand that I've been using for over a year now that I have got to tell you guys about. That is FRE Skincare. Their company started with the launch of a specially formulated sunscreen for active lifestyles that won't leave you greasy or break you out. But they've since expanded to a wide range of products, from tinted moisturizers to facial cleansers and oils, a line of body products, and most notably their FRE 123 set, which is the perfect place to start if you're new to their products. I'd also recommend picking up their Detox Me face mask. It has cleansing microbeads made from jojoba oil that are perfect for a light exfoliation without stripping your skin. It also leaves my face feeling so fresh and supple after using it. I love it. FRE's team of dermatological scientists have formulated each product with the rejuvenating benefits of argan oil to hydrate, protect, and exfoliate your skin and leave you glowing or your money back. Plus, as part of their give back mission, for every skincare set that they sell, they plant an argan tree to help replenish the endangered argan forest in Morocco and support the women who harvest the argan oil. To get the glowy skin you've been seeking and a risk-free trial of their famous FRE 123 set, head to freskincare.com/MelanieM and use the code MelanieM at checkout for a wicked discount. That's freskincare.com/MelanieM. When you say what types of... So would you mind sort of elaborating on what types of conversations you just don't really resonate with?
I don't like to talk about people.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
I do not. And that's to say, like, I talk about this with my mom so much, because sometimes, she'll tell me what's going on with, like, Mexican actresses and, the gossip news. And I get that that's for fun, and my mom will be like, I'm just watching TV. So sometimes I can get nitpicky about that. But, I understand that sometimes we will talk about situations that happen in our community or with other people. But to some extent, if I'm finding out someone's personal business and they're not telling me directly, I feel very uncomfortable with that. So I think that's kind of where it started, where I don't know this person, I shouldn't be knowing this. So I would kind of tune myself out. But then I realized, well, I'm still physically here, so I'm allowing for this communication exchange to happen. So, and that's not to say that my friends were like talking crap about people, but even in the simplest ways, I feel like these are habits that we build. So, whenever I was in a situation, with people, and not with everyone, but at least with like my really, really close friends, I felt comfortable telling them, like, I would prefer not to. So we would talk about, other stuff, like, I would have random conversations sometimes, like theorize conspiracy theories, just other things, as opposed to people.
Yeah, I love that. I think that was probably one of the first things that I realized before I was into any of the stuff I'm into now. I realized I don't really like talking about people. It just felt a little low vibe. I felt like we were having conversations where we're just passing judgment on others who weren't present and who we really don't know. That can happen with people that you know in your community, but it can also, most commonly happen with like celebrity stuff, news like that, because it's easy to watch someone on the screen and think, oh, like, I know better. Why are they with this person? Or why'd they pass on this? And why? But you know nothing about them. And it's so easy once maybe it's not easy, but once you've separated enough from that, as it seems you have, it's easy to just look at it and be like, let them do their thing. I have no idea. I have no idea who they are. I don't know anything about them. So I do not know better for them. They're where they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. And something that I say, like, it's always hard to gauge someone's intent behind something. And in general, I think a lot of us can be really quick to kind of jump to conclusions and assume someone's intent behind an action. And I mean, we don't know. I always like to think of both sides of a situation.
That's really hard. You mentioned when you kind of drop off the map, and it's cool to have friends that know things are okay. I'm not, less than just because Marcie's not talking to me right now, or her not talking to me doesn't mean she's mad at me. That's actually something I've been having to recognize in myself, to sort of check that, like, the world doesn't revolve around me in a basic sort of way. The world doesn't revolve around me, and not everything that someone else is doing has to do with me. And in most cases, it probably has nothing to do with me. If it does, it's because they perceive it a certain way, and it's not because I necessarily did something wrong. If it has to do with me, maybe they just perceive it as something bothersome, but that's on them, not me.
Yes. And, for me, that was my first lesson in therapy in the sense of understanding that it's out of our control what people will, I guess, kind of come to conclusions with, because I had previously, I guess, really had the mentality of trying to be as clear and as open as possible to not have any misunderstandings happen. Just to give an example. And let's say, I'm in a situation where I thought I was being as clear and explicit as possible, and yet there was still a misunderstanding. It's kind of out of my control, because everyone is their own individual person. And I think it was so eye-opening for me to realize that. And even now, that's something that is also a work in progress for me, in terms of remembering that everyone, just how I'm very much sometimes in my head and with my own flow of things, everyone else is on their own path and probably not thinking about me, like you said. We tend to think, because just, it's our own life, so we're focused on our feelings, that we think that everyone else is in tune, but who knows what other people are thinking about that we don't even know.
It's also a relief to have that perspective. Instead of getting frustrated, it sounds like you can just sort of let it go and be like, well, they have whatever they have going on, whatever's in their head. And if you weren't in touch with that idea, then it would be easy to get frustrated at the person. And that's where the conflict, I think, really derives. Like, I don't follow politics or anything, but when we have these sort of conflicts, it's because you're not seeing what I'm seeing. People get upset about that. But not everyone can see what you're seeing.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's, I believe that perspective is everything. And like you said, sometimes it's difficult, or, not to say, or maybe impossible for some people at that moment to share that same perception. And with that, I feel like it's difficult sometimes for me when I think about it still, because I'm still trying to gauge how to move about that aspect, because our society still, I think of myself at work, for example, and how there's certain, I don't know, societal norms, or there's a structure to how things happen. So I'm kind of adapting these core values to the different experiences that I'm still exposing myself. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Tell me if I have it right. I guess I'm kind of looking at two different selves sort of thing. There's the you who you spend time with and who you really like and who feels authentic. And then there's the you who has to go out and face these different situations where the majority of people seem to not be as cognizant of these values that you hold. So the environment might be rushed, or people are pushy or disrespectful sometimes, the sort of energy that's around. Do I have that right? I don't know, just sort of
I think that's going there. And also, to add to that, I would say a part that was a comment I was going to make a little while ago is through vocalizing and expressing kind of having these kinds of conversations, you find out that there are other people who are aware and cognizant of these facts, but they might have the same mentality of, well, look at this environment that I'm in. Other people might not think that same way. So people will tend to kind of close off and not be open to expressing themselves. So I think that's why having these conversations, is important, because I feel like I've run across more and more people sharing these beliefs, but just feeling apprehensive about, expressing them out of fear of, having people say like, oh, there's so many XYZ labels that we can, or comments that we can add to that. Like you're being so touchy-feely, or
being ignored.
Being ignored, yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, whether it's being told a comment or being dismissed, it's not being heard, right? Or not being seen. So I know something that has also impacted your well-being is the sort of media that you choose to consume. I think you told me last time that you've been particular about the kind of content that you introduce to yourself, and that impacts your just happiness generally. So can you talk a little bit about the sort of, whether it be news or music, any sort of media that you feel is beneficial for your personal sense of self versus what's not so helpful?
I think currently I'm at a point where, again, in going back to kind of what we touched on at the beginning, and trying to be mindful about my self-care routine, exposing myself to things that remind me about self-care and positive thoughts and mindfulness, that's probably been my focus. At some point last year, I went through my Instagram and I unfollowed. So I used to be into vegan food pages. That was my main focus, I feel like, when I would scroll on Instagram, and I started to question well, I mean, and that's cool, don't get me wrong, I still a vegan foodie at heart, but I feel like I've already had a lot of conversations with some of my friends about film and TV and video games and just all these different forms of media and what it does to us subconsciously. And I know a lot of people have different opinions about that. For me, I had kind of been really disconnected from watching TV. I don't really see a lot of movies. My friends always give me a lot of crap about that, but that was just kind of a personal choice of mine. I preferred to be more into the internet growing up, YouTube videos. And even that really started to evolve over the last couple of years, where I just started to follow exclusively content creators who talked about spirituality and, making positive changes in your life. And I think I just really started to become mindful about the information that I was taking in, because if you listen to something long enough, whether or not we're consciously aware of it, I feel energetically we take that in. And for me, it resonated a lot more with me to focus on more spiritual aspects. So I feel a lot of my media is reflective of that. And aside from that, this was something that I know we had mentioned about prayer, or I had mentioned about my music. For example, I love music. I love listening to music all the time. It's weird that there's no music playing right now. Like I mentioned, my house always has music playing. And I feel like as a reason I've been trying to be more mindful about the lyrics in the songs and what it is that I'm kind of taking in on that aspect as well. So, but with that, sometimes I think can just enjoy, a good rap song regardless of the content of the lyrics, but still toggle with both, trying to be mindful of that.
Do you put any of these things on videos or music? Do you put them on as background entertainment, or do you always choose to press play when you want to spend actual dedicated time listening to them? I feel personally that I have to be conscious of am I putting this on just to have this background stimulus, or am I actually trying to focus on this?
That's actually something that has evolved over the last couple of weeks, because I know in my previous job, I would have music playing all day during the office, at my desk while I was working. And so there it was definitely background music. And also to add some noise, because the office where I worked at was really quiet. But recently I don't really hear music throughout the day just because now I'm at work and I can't have music playing. But now I feel like it's a lot more intentional, and I love to like sing along. So it is multitasking because like I'll have music while I'm getting ready or while I'm baking, for example. I feel like it definitely helps set like the tone. Yeah, because definitely, like, for example, if I'm making conchas and I'm putting the sugar topping, I have like certain songs that I like to listen to because it gets me in like the rhythm. So like it's a bit intentional in that sense, for sure.
Maybe that makes it more fun too when you have those dedicated moments to play the music instead of just, I don't know, would it be as special if you were able to have it playing like back then when you had your other job and you just play music all day long? Was it as fun, I guess, to listen to the song still?
I would get like tired of listening to my same playlist over and over again. That's for sure. Yeah. I think it definitely is a lot more special now. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned something else, that you had gone through your Instagram feed and unfollowed a whole lot of people that no longer resonated with you. And you mentioned unfollowing vegan food blogs in particular. So do you prefer some of these things that maybe are interesting to you, but you choose not to follow now? Is that because you'd rather seek it out instead of have it just bombarding you? Or what's the intention behind that?
I think it definitely stemmed from the fact that, I mean, I would pop up Instagram and that was all I would see. just different types of like food from like places that I hadn't even been to, that are from other states, other countries, and connected with that, it even got to the point where I feel like I wouldn't even see posts from like people I actually knew. And I think that was another aspect as well, kind of not being so connected to, because I feel like with social media, there's like the social media interactions that connect to like our community, at least for me, you know, the people I know, you know, my friends, other community members, you find out about events, you're able to network, just that kind of interaction. And then there's I've never entertained this thought. So the other aspect of, I guess, just exploration, kind of like that exploration page, and you can see so many different types of content, from people cutting bars of soap to make ASMR noises to different types of like plant-based foods. You know, I've so many different types of experiences. And I think for me, it just got really overwhelming in the sense of, I guess I just had felt really disconnected. And in the sense of trying to connect more with the people I actually talk to and just be more intentional, I went and followed a whole bunch of, like, a clean out. I think that's what they call that, right? Like a social media clean out. Yeah.
I like that. How would you recommend to someone who hasn't done that to go about it?
Oh, wow. I feel it's so different for everyone. Like, it depends on how you like to engage on social media, because I like to not just like scroll just to scroll. Like, if I'm going to look at someone's picture, like, I want to see it, I want to read the caption. And if you feel like you're scrolling through stuff and it doesn't really catch your attention, then why are you entertaining it to begin with? I think that's what it comes down to, like being intentional. Like, what you're scrolling through, is it things that you genuinely enjoy? What are you taking from it? Yeah, intent is everything. So seeing, and I understand that people or social media plays different roles for different people. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that even when you come home from work, sometimes during that 20 minutes of decompression, sometimes you'll be on your phone. So it can also be a positive tool to unwind with.
Definitely, yeah. And then interact, and I know for me, it helps me just to connect, just because sometimes I can get really busy, and it helps me kind of stay in the know, to know what's going on. But with that being said, I don't like to become too dependent on that. Like, I'll tell my friends, like, you want me to find out something, you need to tell me. Don't tell me to look at your story.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, so sorry. I look at people's stories sometimes, but it's like, well, especially when you have a really close relationship with someone, I think. But I have tried to stay open-minded with that, because I mean, if it were up to me, I've thought sometimes, like, I wouldn't be on social media at all. You know, I would prefer to seek out that motivation to see someone in person versus like engaging with them through messaging. And I also prefer to talk. It's easier for me to ramble than to type out my thoughts. But I know that times shift, and I know social media has become a lot more prominent. And I mean, I think about like my business and what I've done, and I mean, I'm thankful for social media. So it's about, I think, just being mindful as to how we feel when we use it, and I think being intentional, at least for me.
Okay, I like that. That's a good thought to keep in mind to go through your social media feed. Something else that has occurred to me is that in discussion about boundaries and sort of deciding when you need to spend time with yourself and how much energy to give certain situations, I know you used to be involved in activism, right? So what, if you want to talk a little bit about that and how it's my understanding that you're not as involved with activism anymore. How do you have passion for certain causes and not let that overwhelm you, as I think many people can easily get sucked into? When you really, admire a cause, you just want to give your all to it. But how do you find that balance personally?
I think it's the form of activism has evolved. That's how I've kind of seen it, because there's like direct action, right? And so let's talk about, let's say, like animal rights in particular. And I think of when I first switched to like a plant-based diet, and I think it just had a lot to do also with the group of like friends that I had at the time, and the relationships that I was fostering. It was with people who were involved in that like direct action, like actually standing outside of a Safeway, protesting Tyson Farms with signs, and getting signatures. So and for me, that was something very new, something I hadn't been exposed to, for example, here in Imperial Valley. So I think I was just open to it, and because I felt very passionately for the cause. And I think I partook in those activities outside of the state. So when I came back, I don't think I saw myself being outside of Vaughn's with signs. There was just something about that thought that I just felt very apprehensive about that. It's funny. I remember I got little like PETA and Humane League flyers that talked about, animal agriculture. And, at the time, the job that I had, we had resource fairs. So like I would put out those on my resource table, and I think around that time also I had started with Sweet Surrender. So with the baking business, and I was like, okay, when I set up my pastries, they're plant-based. So I had already started toying with the idea of spreading the plant-based vegan message in that way. So I was like, well, I'll have the little pamphlets out as well at the same time. So then that way I can so it was my own way of like modifying that element. And I think as time went on, I just started to see my activism kind of transcend or connect more to my, to the business. And so, or to the baking. And that's still like a thought that I've been toying with, because I feel like other things just happened in my life that I got away from that. And now that I'm coming back and that I'm focusing more on the things that I want to focus on, that's something that I come back to. So when we have this conversation, it's interesting to me, because that is something that really was the root of Sweet Surrender at the time, well, Happy Moment Now, which was spreading that message about, plant-based foods. So I think activism can look different ways, for different people. Definitely. And that's just how I've integrated it into my life, low-key, because I feel like unbeknownst to most people, but it's a work in progress. Mm-hmm.
Is it more exhausting to go do those sort of riots and passing out flyers, like being out there? I feel like it takes more energy, and that kind of, when you do that sort of thing, doesn't it become sort of your everything? And it sounds like right now you're able to have multiple interests, and this is just one thing that you can slide in with to fit in with you, instead of you chasing after this one thing. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think partially that plays a role, but another element as well, I think, is also me thinking, in my opinion, what is the most effective way. And that's not to say that I don't believe that, taking direct action isn't effective, but again, thinking of, for example, like where we live in our community and the point of where we're at right now, I feel like there are other methods that can kind of lay the foundation that would be more effective. Because I think, and this connects kind of to, like, I feel like my other side passion when it comes to like teaching and training. It's about kind of knowing your audience. And I feel like through knowing your audience, you can gauge which ways it's best to, divulge information. So I guess I just felt like people like to eat. So showing them, that was just the way that I kind of made that connection, that it's another method that can be effective in showing people. I think not so much that I didn't feel like I could, or that I didn't want to change my lifestyle to incorporate that type of action, but I just wanted to find another way.
I like that. It also stands to show the way some people think that they can't do certain things because, as we said earlier, like, you need to fit the expectation of what you've been shown and the way you think maybe activism for whatever your cause is needs to look like. There's subtle ways, easier ways, more relevant ways that you can apply it to your own life. Yeah. So yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. I wanted to touch on that.
Like, I'll add, like, don't do nothing just because you can't do everything. My favorite quote.
My now favorite quote, thanks to you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get into some closing questions now. Okay. First thing being, what are your sun, rising, and moon signs?
Oh, fun. My sun sign is Gemini, rising sign Sagittarius, and my moon is Aquarius.
What are 3 things that make you feel like your best self? These can be products or routines, anything that makes you feel good.
I would have to think about it a little bit. Sure. To narrow down.
And that's also why I've included 3 things and not just 1 thing, because 1 thing is like too hard.
I'm like struggling with 3. I'm like, if I had to only pick 1, 3 that make me feel good. It's interesting that you asked this, because I had been watching a video a while back, and this person was giving just like spiritual guidance, and the question to focus on was, think about the things that make you feel disempowered. And that was my question for December. I had that thought, and I kind of flipped it in my brain and thought of it like the other way, like, well, what makes me feel empowered? Because I liked thinking about it on the positive end. So I'm trying to think back to those thoughts right now. I think definitely connecting with other people. Connecting with others definitely makes me feel like my best self. Right, that was the question. Connecting with other people. Just being able to be still, but I don't mean that in the physical sense, because I think that's something that I've just learned to cherish, to be able to really enjoy like everything that's going on around, and that's something that is talked about a lot nowadays, I feel, and I love it. I love hearing it, even like at work and so many different types of realms. You hear about mindfulness, and I think it's a beautiful thing at its core when you're able to just be present and experience the moment. So connected with that and being with other people. And the third one, can I just lump up my self-care routine?
Yeah.
There we go. Makes it easier. Mm-hmm.
What is the best piece of advice that anyone has ever given you?
Oh, wow. These are really good questions. I love these. The best piece of advice. Dang. There's so many. Be you, but first you have to figure out who that is. That was what started it all for me.
What is a book, a podcast, a movie, or any sort of resource that you would recommend to listeners that has inspired you?
The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. That was like hands down, that book was like a life changer for me.
Michael Singer. Is he also the one who wrote
The Untethered Soul?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the Surrender Experiment is actually a little bit more like an autobiography that explains more like with his personal life detail what inspired the Untethered Soul. Mm-hmm. So I actually read it before. I also recommend The Untethered Soul too, but because Michael Singer explains like his life story, for me that was just that changed my life, that book.
That sounds interesting. I'll need to check that out. If you could have dinner with one person, living or dead, who would it be?
My dad. He passed away 3 years ago, and I think having gone through all of like the personal growth that I've gone through now, like just to like have an hour, and I would love that. Yeah.
What is your current favorite food or a food that has been lining you up? I'm a bit of a foodie, so.
Oh gosh. My current favorite food, the day before yesterday, oh gosh, I had like the most amazing slice of pizza from Jessica from Strangers West. And I feel like I hadn't had pizza in a long time. So I feel like that's the most recent, my Mama Carmen is a witness to that I was just like, this is the most amazing slice of pizza ever. All her pizzas are really good, but there was just something about that slice. So, but something else that has been, for some reason, like I've been, sometimes it's hard, like my mom and I will finish baking sometimes and we'll be like, okay, we haven't had food, like we need to eat. So what are we going to eat? Which is why meal prepping is another goal of mine for this year. So I don't have to scramble to like figure out what to make. Or well, my mom, because she's really good. She's the cook. Just like tortillitas, just like fried on like a pan, just like corn tortillas, just cut up with like onion. It's like a random food, but
like chilaquiles?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I guess without the sauce, so yeah, just random. Yeah.
I love hearing the random things that people, because everyone has their go-to meals and it's so different. So that's fascinating. I like hearing that. Okay. And lastly, just tell us where everyone can find you or learn more about you and what you do.
Well, on Instagram, my personal account, Marcie the Vegan, I feel like I share random stuff there about self-care, just about me, and then on my business page, Marcie's Happy Moment, for baking stuff. And now I'm also trying to incorporate some self-care elements into that as well. So just trying to spread awareness.
Woohoo. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Marcie. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. All the topics we've touched on are very near and dear to me, so
thank you. Likewise.
I appreciate it.
I feel so happy to be able to do this. Thank you.
There we have it. Isn't Marcie just so pleasant? She's someone that I can see myself discussing ideas with for hours on end. I think the culture we all live in can be a little extremist at times, so an idea I've been thinking a lot about lately is how we can pull inspiration from different places. Marcie is quite an example of that. You can take insight from respected teachers, but also simplify that into bits and pieces of things that resonate with you. Maybe a lifestyle or a certain cause holds appeal, but as a package, it feels like too much. Well, get creative and see how you can incorporate principles from that lifestyle, cause, or whatever it is into your own life, even if it's just in a small way. There's always something you can do, and even a small movement is still movement. Marcie has been so fun to talk to, and I'd really like to hear anything that you took away from this episode or found inspiring. Shoot me a message, leave me a comment. I'd love to know. And lastly, for all of you guys listening, I want to mention a cool promotion that I'm testing out. I'm opening up my calendar for action-based coaching calls. So what this is exactly is a chance to talk to me one-on-one about anything you might be struggling with. There have been so many times in my life where I have felt stuck and did not know how to move forward. I've also gotten myself out of said situations more times than I can count. From talking with others, I've realized that I'm also pretty good at identifying limiting beliefs and pinpointing these things that keep us stagnant. So once we figure out what's blocking us, then we can formulate steps to change our reality. Many of us get used to telling the same old story or going through repetitive motions that we forget we have total power to change and overcome situations through thought and action. So at the time of this podcast release, these action-based coaching calls are completely free, no strings attached. Basically, all you need to do is have a phone and we can make this happen. I'm really excited to test this out and help support you in the growth that you desire. If this sounds like something you'd be interested in, then click over to the show notes where I'll leave a link to where you can read more and sign up to book a call with me. Again, you've got nothing to lose, only the potential to grow. With that, I'll end things